Hey, it's Liz D'Alto, and this is the Untamed the Wild Soul Woman podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untamed the Wild Soul Woman is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. Liz D'Alto here, your host for Untamed the Wild Soul Woman, a virtual conversation series where I get to dig in with some really powerful and inspiring women on how they transcend their fears and their struggles and also just create these amazing lives, very meaningful lifestyles that they do their own way without actually following all of the rules. Maybe sometimes some, but not all. And today I have Casey Baker. And Casey I met years ago because she is a speaker trainer for thought leaders, for like amazing leaders. And I went to an event of hers in New York City, but then I think we also met at RHH Live, and then she was a personal training client of mine for a little while when I was still doing fitness stuff. So we have all these cool interconnections, and so we'll have a lot of stuff to talk about. So Casey, thank you for being here.
I feel really honored. I love the whole intention and topic of this summit. So when I heard about it, I was like, invite me to speak.
It was funny because I actually had this entire spreadsheet of women I wanted to invite, and you were totally on it, but you were literally on it because the minute I posted that, you were like, oh my God, I'm in. And I was so excited about that. So I appreciate your enthusiasm. Yeah. So the first question that I've been asking every single woman is, what do you love about being a woman?
It's such a beautiful question. There are so many aspects of how I could answer that. But I think they all are rooted in the experience of having my body, a woman's body.
Yeah.
It is, I recognize more and more in my life, especially since I've given birth, how my body is truly the source of it all. I mean, it's the source of it all. Every single person on this planet came through a woman's body. I mean, that is just flippin' amazing. And how our ability to feel pleasure is so extraordinary. And the deep, because men feel pleasure too. I don't know what it's like to be a man, so I just can't speak to that. I'm sure there are amazing things about being a guy. But I just know that as being a woman, that my soul is, the experience of my soul is the experience of living in my body. And I get to have a true direct experience being here, having my body of my soul and all the infinite ways my soul wants to express itself and all the infinite ways in which I have to, it's like the work in my life is opening my body more deeply so that my soul can come through more fully.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful process. It's divine in its very nature, and it's so beautiful. I love dancing, and that is just, really, if I thought about like the thing that I just love more than anything else in my life is to dance, and to dance with a woman's body and my hips and all the ways that feels for me. It's just a profound gift to have, to be a woman and to have my body, something I take enormous gratitude in.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your work, but I also want to talk about you personally. So we'll just dance in and out, since you love to dance, of all of the topics. I know, because I've heard you tell your story, that wasn't always the case, right? Loving being in a woman's body.
Right. I had a real experience. I guess it was, I mean, I loved, I mean, I was a girl, I loved just having fun in my body, and I was a dancer and all that stuff. But it started, I mean, it's just high school, college, it all just got so convoluted and confusing and painful. And, I think that was when at some point in the high school era, I think is when what I call like it was like commodity, like I was began to believe my body was a commodity. And I wouldn't know that at the time. It wasn't like, I believe my body's a commodity. But I mean, it was just this incredible stress around how my body looks, and is it good enough? Mm-hmm. And is it good enough to receive love? Is it good enough compared to other women? Is it good enough for this guy? I mean, just the stress of that was incredible. And it really all came to a head when I was in my mid-20s. I developed completely disfiguring cystic acne. I mean, just really, really intense, all over my face, covering completely. And I lost my ability to identify with being physically a beautiful woman. And that was painful. I went through a real massive dark night of the soul. And it was also exactly the medicine I needed, because around that time was when I discovered Tantra. It was when I discovered the work of Byron Katie. I was traveling a lot at that time in my life. Poetry really became alive for me, and dancing became alive for me in a real free kind of way. And so I began to tap into actually this internal beauty. And I began a deep love affair of that, but also a deep desire to share it and be seen in that, but so much shame. And my skin was such a reflection of that shame. Am I good enough? And so the healing of that has been, I mean, it was so incredible, and I got to dive in and discover that who I am is always beautiful. The true essence of who I am is beauty itself. And so that was a huge transformation for me.
Ooh, you're making me want to cry. I can relate to this so much, not in the terms of acne, but in the last 2 years, really, since I quit personal training and kind of was also in this like identity, who am I? What do I do in the world? How do I want to be seen? I put on this like 10 pounds that I just cannot get rid of. And it's so interesting being like, what's the protection? What's the lesson? And it's like multifaceted, like you said. But I think that's something that, it comes up. There's one of those Beyonce songs from that album she released last year was called Pretty Hurts. And it's kind of like the same. Something that's blown my mind this year is realizing that like no one has it any better than anyone else, right? Like there's no hierarchy of pain. There's no like, there are people like everyone thinks it's super easy to be like a white man. And sure, there's some privilege that comes with that. But men also, they deal with stuff, the pressure of being a man and having to provide and being seen this certain way and follow gender roles. So I think there's probably a really amazing piece around growing up as a beautiful woman and then all of a sudden being like, oh my God, that's how I existed in the world. So what were some of the differences? I'm curious, did you notice, and I know everything on the outside is a reflection of the inside, but did people treat you differently? I mean, what?
Yeah. I mean, I think I remember coming home. I had been traveling for a while, and I came home to Texas, and it was this like elephant in the middle of the living room that I could feel that my family was thinking about and noticing, but hardly saying anything to me, except for my mother. And it was just like heart aching for her. She took me to meet with different people to try to get it healed and cleared up and all this stuff. And I just went into a hole. I went into my room and I stayed there. And it was, I mean, that's so different. I'm such an outgoing person. Yeah. And so that was huge. And I remember there was this kid in the restaurant. I went with my family to have breakfast at this restaurant. And I remember this little boy with his family. And I remember walking by, and he said to his parents, "What's wrong with her? What happened to her face?"
Oh, God.
Oh, it was heart-wrenching. That stuck with me for so long. And that's when I realized that people generally don't say anything, but people are thinking it. And that was so hard. I mean, that was really painful. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm sure it's like a huge journey, but maybe one or two of the most integral things that brought you home inside to that like deep inner beauty that you were talking about, realizing that like, I'm here. I've always been here.
Well, I'll speak. I'll expand a little more on a couple of things that I just mentioned. I discovered the practice of. First, I discovered like the spiritual practice of tantra, and then that led me into a deeper hole of exploring the nature of my sexuality and my sexual energy, and I started doing healing work on myself. Sexual healing work. And I studied about it too. I became a certified Tantra instructor, and I learned about Taoist sensual massage practices. And it was, I think that developing a loving, compassionate, healing relationship with myself, with my body, with my sexuality, and the exploration that I went through in that, it introduced me to experiences inside of myself that were undeniably beautiful and undeniably gorgeous. And I think something began to get rewired for me. I began to realize that the value of who I am, that like I am the source of value. You know, it's that my experience inside, the beauty inside, the connection to source that I experienced was so, it changed me. It really changed me. And so I began to walk around the world and see the world in a different way. You know, I had this recognition of a very beautiful flow of life inside of myself. And that was like a major shift from where I was before, of thinking that the value of who I am is based on how I look or how my body appears or is perceived by others.
Yeah.
So that's like the shift that I would call from external validation to internal validation. And that was like holographic through my whole life. I began to see that the wisdom and the creativity that I have inside is inherently valuable in itself, whatever people perceive about it. And so it changed not only my experience of my sexuality and the flow of life within me, but also my experience of my creativity. And so that was very healing for experiences of shame and feeling held back. So the more that I felt and experienced freedom to express myself in the world, I simultaneously experienced greater healing in my body and deeper knowledge of how to care for myself. I also, during that time in my life, I can't say enough about the impact that the work of Byron Katie had on me. I mean, I walked around for 2 years with a pen and piece of paper, and that is all that I did.
Is it true?
Is it true? I was on constant radar with what was going on in my mind. I just undid my mind. I just undid it. And I was very involved. I went to her school like 3 times.
You did? Oh, yes. I'm actually, at the time we're shooting this, it's the end of December. I'm going to 1 day of her New Year's mental cleanse next week. I've never seen her live before. I've only ever listened. So I can't wait. I'm really excited, but keep going.
I'm so excited for you. I did the New Year's cleanse. That was awesome. I mean, it's just like morning to night, just people doing the work. It's great. And it really is, you know, I mean, it was the more you undo your mind, the more your heart is just free and flowing, and the clarity. So that was really huge for me. And I still use the work often in various ways with people who come to work for me, because I find it's amazing in helping to undo that stopgap in our mind around the free flow of our creativity. So those were 2 huge ones. There are so many others.
Yeah. Those are two amazing and like very appropriate to this, because both of those topics, like sexual healing, like the relationship between women and their sexuality and their sensuality to their creativity and their visibility, has come up a lot in the series, as well as this is not the first mention of Byron Katie. So if you're watching, but this is the first interview you're watching where we mention Byron Katie, just check her out. It's Byron, Byron, and then Katie, and it's called The Work. And to give just like the tiniest summary, she basically is all about how your thoughts create your suffering, and just being an observer of your thoughts. So it's not trying to control your thoughts, because that's kind of futile. It's just being like, hey, here's my thought, or here's my judgment. I'm human. You know, a lot of people talk about non-judgment, but Byron Katie goes, you're human, you're going to judge. So instead of putting the effort towards trying not to, just how do you react when you do? And it is like the most liberating stuff in the world. So tangent, but yeah, that stuff has helped me tremendously too.
And actually, just to say a bit more about why I think it's so, for me, was so effective in a space of feeling such non-love of myself, to go to such radical love of myself. Yeah. Her process is such about a deep love and respect for the mind. And it's a process of really loving the mind, not trying to be, you know, no thoughts or whatever, but how can you love, you know, and it's just 4 questions that you ask to any stressful thought, and it's amazing. They work.
Yeah, super. You know, I almost actually, I was going through a breakup. I had to pull my car over because at one point she goes, she said something like, no one has ever loved another. So basically, any deep love that you feel for another person is really your deep love for yourself. And I was just like, ah! Like, I had to stop the car. So thank you for also reminding me that like it's about the deep love, which is amazing. So speaking of deep love, I remember the event of yours that I went to. I know you work with a lot of entrepreneurs and executives and helping people find their voice, hone their message, and you train people to speak. But what I loved about your event is there were a number of women who were just up there to be up there. Yeah. So this topic of visibility also came up. I think you know Christina Marassi, yeah? Uh-huh. We were talking about that a little bit during her interview. Why is that such a big thing for women?
Because we are emanators of light. You know, it's such a, you know, we were born to share the beauty and the light and the truth that lives within us. That's the big gift of why we're here. And there's infinite ways in which that gets expressed through every single one of us. And so the need to be seen is a holy need. It's a holy desire. It's you know, that in my experience, in the deepest moments of sharing truth, of sharing beauty, and it could be something that is spoken, it could be in an intimate experience in the bedroom with someone, it could be the way in which you dance. It's to shine like that and share your light in that unique way, and to be witnessed and to be seen is a profound experience of intimacy and connection. And so at the intersection of being seen, you also have the seer, and in that is the gift. That's the connection, the love, the intimacy. And there's also transmission that can happen. So when you are a woman who has wisdom or creativity to share, and you feel a deep need to share it, it is so easy for our minds to try to talk ourselves out of it. Who am I to do this? Someone else is already doing it. I'm not any different. What if people think it's ugly? What if people think I'm ugly? What if people don't like it? What if people don't get it? I mean, there's so much stuff.
Yeah.
Am I back?
We're back.
Okay. We're back. So my experience is that there's really 2 things that go on, right? And this is and this is kind of the big revelation that I had early this January after I gave birth to Connor in November. It was that so much of my desire, my work is in supporting women and putting their wisdom out into the world, is service-oriented work for women who feel called to be of service. And so there is a sharing of your wisdom or the gift that you have to give to the world, because it can be of service for others. And that is beautiful, and that is really incredible. And then there's a whole other realm of sharing your creativity and however that appears, and wanting it to be seen, wanting it to be heard. That has actually to do with your devotion to the flow of that creativity. And you get stopped when it's like, is it, are people going to get it? Is it good enough? It's like the person who creates this incredible painting, and it's like, you do it because that's the inspiration in the moment, and because in the moment of creating, you are tapped into something divine. And that divinity is wanting to come through and to have its expression and have it be seen. So there's two different ways in which my own self, I have to really do the dance of, like, I'm sharing this wisdom, even though I have a lot of fear around it not being good enough, because I know and I believe that it is in service to others, and it can change the world. And then it's almost like some places, though, of my creativity have nothing to do with that. They have nothing to do with changing the world. Nothing. They only have to do with, in that moment, having that intimacy with the deepest part of myself and what's flowing through me, or something larger than me. And that too needs to be seen. But when we put on, like, is it of service? Is it, then we can muck it up.
Yeah.
So I really feel like there's two different realms, and both of them involve being seen, and both of them are, it's a holy need.
Yeah, I agree with you. Something that came up in my interview with Susanna Frioni the other day, because we were talking about the topic of wild, and how some people, I've asked people, what's your definition of wild? What does it feel like for you? Because it's different for everyone, right? Like, one of my women said, I don't really think I'm wild, but she has rigorous boundaries. She chooses to be super laid back. She doesn't get involved in other people's drama. And in a way, that's super wild, because it's completely not status quo, right? So I'm loving what you're saying here, because you're saying, yeah, like, part of what I do is to be in service. Part of what I do is to just friggin' be creative, because I think as women, that's like a core belief, right? Like we have to be useful or serving or, taking care of everyone else. But when that expression gets stifled, that's when people do. They get sick, or some like cataclysmic life event happens, or stuff like that. So I know the answer to this has to be yes. And I'd love if you have like a story or an example. I bet you have some women that have no idea what their full expression is until they come to you and they're like, oh my God, that's me.
Yeah, it's true. And I really believe that a large part of that has to do with the quality and the depth of my listening for them. That's why it's so important, I believe, to surround yourself, or at least have one person that you do spend quality time with, who sees and is committed to seeing your light, or a framework about you or about themselves, or they're not present and they're listening, that they're just devoted to seeing and recognizing and being a stand for your light. And that's what I call fertile listening. It's like the kind of listening that you give someone where they can't help but blossom in your presence. And I have girlfriends like that. Where I got switched onto this is because I've got two girlfriends, Sonia and Wendy, two of many, but they're two very dear ones. And a few years ago, I had some like crazy ideas about these videos I wanted to make where we interviewed the planet, like trees and rocks and things like that. And then we go on these adventures and we like wear heels and we go and interview the planet, and the planet like speaks, and we like do voiceover for the planet. And they're so funny. We actually did it. And we're actually releasing the first one in sometime this winter. And it's a little project we had called Rocket Out for Planet Earth. But what ended up happening in that experience was that for all three of us, we revolutionized our experience of women friendship, because we got to really dive into what is it to be co-creative, and how do we listen for one another. And it was such a profound experience of celebrating one another, of cheerleading one another, of being a yes and. Like in long form improv, if someone brings a piece of creativity, you don't like dumb it down. You be a yes to it, and then you build on top of it. Yeah. And it's so affirming and supportive for one's creative voice and really coming out, that we were just doing that with each other so intensely. And as a result, not only did all of our lives blossom in so many ways, but we developed profound friendship. Yeah. So that kind of listening, I think, is, yes. I mean, that happens all the time. A woman has ideas that she didn't even know that she had, and the quality of listening and questions that I ask, they come out, and they're just like brilliant wisdom bombs. Amazing.
I love that. And it is so important. And I think there probably is a misconception that you need to be seen and heard and understood by everyone. And it's like, no, you had two people and it was revolutionary. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
So I'm going to totally switch gears for a minute, because when I think of you, I think, and I know I sent you a message about this, so you know this, but you gave me a huge gift this year. I might cry. We'll see. But you posted something on Facebook one day about this woman in your life who, after you had your baby, she came and she was mothering you. And she was just like so nurturing and so amazing. And I think a lot of women can probably relate. For a lot of us, our relationships with our mothers are some of like the biggest sources of wounding in some cases, healing in some cases, but there's just a lot of stuff in that mother-daughter relationship. And so mine is no different. And my mom's amazing, which I think a lot of people probably have the same story. My mom's great and blah, blah, blah. She's provided for me, all this stuff, but there's still so much stuff and layers to unravel. And just the idea of seeing that you had this other woman, that you were available to be mothered by someone not your own mom, and that you could talk about it. Because like that's something that I was like, oh my God, I think my mom would be so upset if I said how I was getting mothered from another woman. I literally, Casey, hadn't even considered that I could get mother energy anywhere but my own mom, and you blew my mind. And then I looked around and I'm like, oh my God, it's everywhere. Like I can let anyone mother me.
Wow. Wow, that's so beautiful. I remember when you wrote and shared about that. I was just so touched,
So, I don't just go off on that tangent to like love bomb you, even though that's a bonus, but were you always open to that and from other places? Like, how did that come about? I'd love to know more about that.
That is a great question. I have to sit with that for just a second.
Take your time.
Kind of fuzzy, interesting. But the one thing that comes to mind that I guess this really does relate. It's really true. I think I tapped into this, like, this is pretty trippy, but I tapped into this like universal river of mother energy before I got pregnant. I was at the time, I was like super into S Factor, which people are like, S Factor mother, but yeah. And I was in Hawaii, and I went to Hawaii with a group of friends, and we had a night where we had a party, and one of the women, her name is Liana Silver, which I don't, Liana maybe. There was an honoring of her because she had just given birth almost a year before and was really just tired. Yeah. And so we had this beautiful honoring of her, and somehow some music was on, and all of a sudden I just felt this urge to dance. And I remember looking at her and having this like prayer that I was like, this one is for all the mamas. And I tapped into something. It was really interesting. And I had this like amazing dance that was definitely like a transmission. It was like a gift, and I was just so free in it. And I remember I've thought about that many, many times because I felt like I tapped into something in that. And what I tapped into has really, I feel like that not long afterwards I got pregnant. And my experience is that I was really open to being mothered, during my birth. Because I recognize that that energy comes from infinite number of people, whether they're mothers or not, whether, they are male or female.
Mm-hmm.
My partner, David, is such a man, and he runs this like very maternal, nurturing energy sometimes, which is so beautiful that he's a yes to that. And so it's really beautiful. I've seen it's universal. But when I was giving birth, my midwife, I mean, she really mothered me. I mean, like she was like cuddling me, she was spooning me, she was rubbing my hair. And then my friend Amalia came that you mentioned, and she was also present at the birth. And afterwards, I mean, I think it's an interesting world that we live in where we have this like, a man and a woman living alone in a home, raising a child. And it's so off and weird. And so we've had a lot of community come and be with us in the last year. And I've just many times had to realize that like I, as a mother, need to be mothered in order to have the energy to continue mothering. And so I think that it's meant to pass down, whether it's your grandmother mothering you or your aunts or your friends or whatever, but that energy can come through from different people. So that was, a little bit about my, how I feel that awakened to that. But I really do feel like there is this river of energy in life that it can express itself through whoever, and you can tap into that energy of mother.
I love that you're calling it a river, because something that also, once you like cracked that open for me, it was almost like, I'm sure there's some kind of children's story. I feel like there is, where there's like a baby bird or something going like, "Are you my mom? Are you my mom?" I feel like that was me everywhere. And in my mind, I was still, because what you just said about like tapping into that river just makes me really want to emphasize for anyone listening that this is available in so many ways that our culture does not in any way, shape, or form teach us and or honor. Like, because even you pause to be like, oh, like this sounds kind of weird. And I'm like, no, the only reason it sounds weird is because it's just not something people talk about a lot. In our communities it is. We're like, nope, the weirder the better. It's totally normal. But even by calling it a river, I've started to study like nature's rhythms, right? Like the elements, astrology, numerology, all these other energies, and even like being near the ocean. Since moving to Southern California, I am like nourished just so being by the water. And like that's Mother Earth, right? That's where like the earth and the ocean, which are two female or mothering elements, meet and merge. And it's just like the most amazing combination. So I just want people to consider taking the blinders off to what those energies even mean or need to look like. It could just be like a hug, and it doesn't have to be like a woman with a child. Like we're all mothers.
It's a particular quality of loving, and it can be, I've definitely experienced, in my own self, like when I have triggers that happen inside of me, fear or some tightness that occurs because maybe it's something that's like come up with like my family, like I'm here with my family. There's like little things that come up, and I recognize that those are like old things. Like I've felt them many, many times in my life. And now there's this flavor of, now I'm very rooted in mother energy because I have a child. But even before that, it was this recognition of like you can meet whatever that feeling is inside of yourself and love it and nurture it in a way that is just unconditional. And it doesn't have to go away. It doesn't have to like transform. It could. But it's just loving that within yourself. There are beautiful ways in which we can tap into that energy to mother ourselves as well, like reparent in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. So how, I know I saw you at a wedding this summer, and I think I sent you a note. I don't remember if I told you or I sent you a note after. Sometimes it takes a little time for me for things to soak in, to really recognize. But I was like, oh my God, obviously I've only ever known you after. I never saw you with your face stuff, but I've always thought you were so stunning. But there was just something about seeing you with the baby and post-baby. I was like, she's just otherworldly. And, in the context of wild, because that's my world now, I see it everywhere. I'm like, there's something so untamed about you post-baby. Not that I know you super well, but even just like sitting next to you, I was like, oh my God, it just like felt so good. Can you tell us about that?
My otherworldliness?
Yes.
I'm curious what pictures you saw.
No, it wasn't a picture. I was with you at Kate's wedding.
Oh, at Kate's wedding. Oh, I thought, okay, right. Yes. Okay. So I didn't understand fully what you said.
Sorry.
So yeah, first of all, that was a great wedding.
So great.
And it's interesting. I would say that it's actually, I feel so much more of this world. I feel so deeply one in so many ways with nature since I gave birth to my child. And I live in Sedona, and that's super magical. It's so magical. My home is surrounded in crystals, and I just built a medicine wheel outside my house, this like massive rose quartz in the center. And, I just feel like the deeper I go in like embracing my connection with nature and being in celebration of that, it's the source of so much creativity for me. And it fills me with an amazing feeling inside. It's the root of where I feel my wildness comes from, is in my amazing, incredible creative ideas. And so I feel like, and the deeper I go in my reverence and play in nature, and I feel that does make a difference in my life, and how it comes across. And I feel like going through that, the birth experience that I had was like, it was just so it was an incredible journey. It was like a medicine journey, and it changed me. I feel like it was the experience that I needed in order to truly begin the path of embodiment for me.
Birth has come up a lot in these conversations. I had Latham Thomas, who that's just what she does. But so many women, and it's interesting, as a woman without children, I'm so curious, because part of me, even doing this series, is, again, I love showing women what's possible. I've used the word deconditioning a lot during this series because I hate pointing fingers. I hate using intense terms like patriarchy, but that shit is real. The culture we've grown up in, a lot of the programming we've had, it's so deep. And so we don't know. It's always crazy to me every time I discover something new to be like, oh my God, and that's always been there. I just didn't know. And I love asking women about their birthing stories because I think there's probably so many moms out there who just did it because that's what moms do and haven't actually honored. Oh my God, I made a person. I was in labor for this many hours. Probably some women, I almost died. All this amazing stuff. So I'm so glad, and thank you for sharing about your experience, because I think it gives every woman the opportunity to sit back who has had a child and be like, oh my God, I did it. I did that too. Crazy.
Yeah. I just posted something on Facebook about this not that long ago, and it was one of these things that had massive response and tons of shares. And it was like, wow, there is a nerve there. And, one of the things that has stunned me is how, before becoming a mother, I did not recognize the value of the mother. And then I became a mother, and I was like, holy, it's incredible. It is you created life in your body, and then you gave birth to it out of your vagina.
Yeah.
And then you are nourishing that being with your milk. And then you are doing all these amazing things, getting up multiple times a night to feed this being, and the love that comes forward to do that. I grew up, and it requires incredible creativity, being a mother, incredible creativity. And I grew up going to to a prestigious college and, all this stuff, and nowhere and anywhere in the definition of success was the topic of becoming a mother. And as a matter of fact, I was loath to admit that I would ever want to become a mother because I thought that was low and ordinary and not special and not successful. And maybe that's a side thing, in your life, a side thing. And now I just see that complete missing of the value of of the female creative force in this world. It is the source of so much insanity in our world. It is the source of so much insanity. And I'm so clear that if we are to really have some kind of authentic transformation in our world and how around issues of war and sustainability with the environment and taking the environment into account and how we do things around here, that we have got to have some kind of transformation of the value of the mother. You know, the source of life. Yeah, whether it's the woman or the source of all of this life, the planet. That the devotion is on somehow consumption and destruction. And what's the pain that we're all in is like the collective pain that I see is that like we are living in this world where the thing that what we most long to be devoted to is the source of life, and we don't grow up in that kind of environment. And it's just
the way you just put that. I just want to repeat it because it's come up so many different contexts. But what you just said, like this devotion to consumption and destruction versus the source of life. There's I love stand-up comedy. Speaking of consumption, this is a topic in my house, pretty present right now because as we've rested over the holidays, one of the things I did was like watch the rest of my favorite TV show, all this stuff. And Mike was like, he was concerned about me watching TV because garbage in, garbage out sometimes, right? So like there's like consumption of stuff, but then like consumption of information. And there's a comedian who I really like because he's funny, Bill Burr. But he has this whole skit where he like just goes off on Oprah saying that being a mother is the toughest job in the world. And then he just goes on to drill like, oh, what, you have to bend down to pick up the toy and like all this stuff. And even though it's comedy, like that's probably what a lot of people think, you know?
Yeah, totally. Totally.
So I love the reframe. It's source of life, not and of course I have a friend who I remember one time she goes, yeah, like single women get to play victim, but once you're a mother, you get to play martyr. But then even that belief, it's just like there's so many crappy labels.
So many crappy labels. There are so many crappy labels, and I think that as the women in our sphere who are doing so much to transform. So, oh my gosh, we're like at the epicenter of so much transformation that's going on in our culture. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be, I think that the impact of that can reach major world levels, but it is in our culture right now. And, women like starting their own businesses and going on the internet and wow, it's a dream. And like,
I could literally throw something and hit it. It's right behind us.
So I was like, is that our buzzer? So the what was I saying?
You were saying at the epicenter, like our culture, it can trickle out wider.
So, I know that for myself, the incredible gift that through my work has created, I remember it was a vision several years ago. I had nothing, I had like a few clients. And it just was growing very quickly. But I had this vision. I was like, I want to create these virtual courses and I want to educate women from around the world. I want to do these live events. And then it all happened. And I was able to do this work virtually and have really beautiful impact on many women's lives while being pregnant. And then later after I gave birth to Connor. And it's a totally different way of work in the world, and we are reinventing that. And I think that our community of women who are women entrepreneurs who are conscious are going to reinvent motherhood. And I think that is actually probably some of our deepest work and contribution that we have to give is how we embrace being a mother and giving our gifts to the world and that dance in them, and being a wild woman in touch with your soul. I think we're really going to reframe this, and I really believe it's going to have. I think it's going to have a big impact on the collective concept of what mother is and looks like.
Yeah. And that goes right back to something you said earlier. It's that yes end, right? Like, I can be a mom. I think so many people, and I'm super guilty of this, the idea of having children, I'm like, oh, my life is over. Or like every time one of my friends get pregnant, I'm like, oh, another one bites the dust. And that's been one of the biggest gifts of this interview series, being like, oh my God, like, no, it's just a different initiation, a different phase, and just a whole new level of like magic and access. Not to, by the way, I'm still in the train of who knows if I'll ever have kids or want it. So if you're watching and you're kind of on the same page as me, like, again, no hierarchy. Mothers are not better than non-mothers. Like, even not having children, there are ways that we mother. So it's just cool, this broader, more expansive concept, like you said. So
exactly. It's like, and the broadened concept of what mother is will include an energy that means whether you have a child or not, that you can bring that mother energy to whatever you are up to, really embracing being the source of life.
Yeah, source of life. I love that so much. I think I might actually call this interview Source of Life. Casey, you're so freaking great. I'm so glad this worked out. Thank you so much. Everyone watching, if you want more Casey Baker in your life, it's her name. Her website is caseybaker.com. She is
A letter C Baker.
Oh,
you're so spell Casey.
That's true. It'll be somewhere around on the page anyway. But thank you so much. Thank you for taking time during the holidays to be with me and to share yourself with these women. It was so great.
Oh, thank you so much. I loved it. Great conversation.
I'll see you later.
Okay.
I would do things like go out into the backyard of our house, and there was this big weeping willow tree, and I would feel like there was this force in the tree that was much stronger than what I was getting going to the synagogue. Or I would, not to say, I'm not trying to offend anybody who's a practicing Jew, but I'm just saying, to me, it was always like there's a force in nature, or there's a force in music, or there's all these things. Part of what I really loved when I was writing Outrageous Openness was this idea of inviting people to know the divine in the mundane right now.